IRGC is likely to adopt lesser radical and more pragmatic approach to basically buy time so that the regime can survive.
There is much more than what is visible or to the naked eye.
Khamenei was killed because uranium enrichment and the Iranian desire to make a bomb.
That expertise is there. People know how to enrich it. There are infrastructure which can again be rebuilt.
Iran today is headless. There is transition, but conclusion is far away.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9, English news as it should be.
A very good morning. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching News9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. Well, on the show this morning, big stories coming your way. First up, Qatar invokes the force majeure for up to 5 years after the last refinery has been hit. What could be the potential implications on India's power generation? We'll bring you that on the show this morning. Also on the show, Sanae Takaichi, Japan's Prime Minister, visits President Donald Trump in Washington. Trump uses the Pearl Harbor jibe. And of course, stock markets plunged 2,500 points yesterday. Can Sensex recover from that hit? We'll bring you that on the show this morning. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. First up, a quick look at the headlines this Friday morning. Oil surges past $119 a barrel before cooling to around $108 on Thursday, sparking sharp swings across global markets amid escalating West Asia tensions. Iran strikes damage Qatar's key LNG infrastructure, affecting 17% export capacity, raising fears of prolonged global gas supply disruption. US President Donald Trump urges Israel to halt attacks on Iranian gas infrastructure as energy strikes escalate conflict and send global prices soaring. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities crippled after weeks of U.S. Israeli strikes, vows complete destruction. Iran launches multiple missile waves towards Israel on Thursday night after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims the Islamic Republic has been decimated by the war. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi condemns Iran's Hormuz attacks, warns escalating tensions could trigger major global economic fallout. The World Trade Organization warns trade growth will slow to 1.9% this year, down from 4.6% in 2025 as the West Asia conflict disrupts energy and supply chains. And after the US Fed, this time the European Central Bank also keeps its key interest rates unchanged at 2%, warning the Iran war is adding uncertainty to growth and inflation across the Eurozone. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz accuses Hungary's Viktor Orban of disloyalty after Budapest blocks a key EU loan for Ukraine despite earlier backing. And we continue to bring you the rolling coverage of the war in West Asia. Let's first begin with oil. Oil prices triggered a roller coaster session across global markets on Thursday, highlighting their growing influence on the world economy. Now, Brent crude briefly surged above $119 per barrel, up sharply from around $70 per barrel before the Iran conflict, after Tehran intensified attacks on energy facilities in the Persian Gulf. Now, markets reacted swiftly. Stocks fell across Asia and Europe, with Japan down 3.4%, Germany 2.8%, South Korea 2.7%, and the Indian stock markets also down 3.25%. But sentiment improved later as oil prices cooled. Brent settled near $108 a barrel, while U.S. crude, the WTI, dropped towards $94 per barrel. The volatility is also reshaping rate expectations, as traders are now betting the U.S. Federal Reserve may not cut interest rates this year amid inflation risks from high oil prices. Meanwhile, global central banks, including Japan, Europe, and the UK, held interest rates steady. Iran's recent missile attacks on Qatar have dealt a major blow to global energy supplies, damaging infrastructure tied to nearly 17% of the country's LNG export capacity. Qatar Energy CEO Saad Al-Kaabi said the destruction at key facilities could take between 3 to 5 years to fully repair, raising concerns of prolonged disruptions in global gas markets. Now, calling the attack unprecedented, Al-Kaabi said he never imagined such a strike would come from a brotherly Muslim country, especially during Ramadan. The damage has forced Qatar to declare force majeure on some long-term LNG contracts, likely impacting supplies to major buyers including Italy, Belgium, South Korea, China, as well as India. The strikes targeted Ras Laffan industrial city, where a fire broke out following the attack. Authorities say the blaze has been brought under control with no injuries reported. Now, Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city is the world's largest LNG hub, or was until Iran struck it. Now, Qatar stating that it could take up to 5 years to rebuild the industrial complex has a direct consequence even on India's energy security as well as the Indian economy. Now, after China, India is the most exposed to Qatar's LNG, which is used for power generation, industrial manufacturing, and a clean alternative to coal and oil. Remember, nearly 40 to 45% of India's LNG imports come from Qatar, making Ras Laffan a critical lifeline for India's energy needs. Now, this means higher import bills, rising inflation, especially fuel and cooking gas, further pressure on the Indian rupee, and of course, India's current account as well as fiscal balance hang in loose. Now, in fact, early signs of stress are already visible. Gas supplies to industries have been curtailed in parts of India, and policymakers are reprioritizing gas allocation, ensuring critical sectors like fertilizers and domestic gas or cooking gas distribution get priority. Any sustained disruption could slow industrial activity and push up input costs across India. The damage may not be short-lived. Some estimates suggest that up to 17% of Qatar's LNG capacity could be offline for years if infrastructure damage is severe. Now, that would tighten global supply structurally, keeping prices elevated. India is already exploring alternatives, including sourcing LNG from U.S., Australia, and Russia. But replacing Qatar at scale is neither easy nor cheap for India. In the near term, costlier energy imports and possible gas rationing could be on the government's agenda. Meanwhile, the government has already asked coal producers to go on a production overdrive, suggesting that greater reliance on traditional coal-based polluting thermal power could be India's answer to the cleaner LNG supply stress. The strikes on Ras Laffan are not just a regional flashpoint. The strike at the heart of global energy flows. And for India, the fallout is immediate and tangible. Higher prices, tighter supplies, and renewed pressure on an already import-dependent energy system. Now on to U.S. now. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday he has urged Israel not to repeat its attacks on Iranian natural gas infrastructure as the conflict intensifies. His remarks come amid a sharp escalation in the U.S. Israeli war on Iran, with both sides targeting key energy facilities. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday he told Israel not to repeat its attack on Iranian natural gas infrastructure, as tit-for-tat strikes on energy plants sent energy prices spiraling. sharply escalating the U.S. Israeli war on Iran.
Have you talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu about attacking the oil and gas fields?
Yeah, I did. I told him don't do that, and he won't do that.
Trump's comment came as energy prices jumped on Thursday after Iran responded to an Israeli attack on a major gas field by hitting Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city, which processes around a fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas. It caused damage that will take years to repair. Trump is politically vulnerable to rising fuel prices among his core voters and has lashed out at allies who have responded to his demands that they help secure the Strait of Hormuz, the conduit for around a fifth of the world's oil. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he got the message.
Well, I'll say two things. Fact number one, Israel acted alone against the Slawiya gas compound. Fact number two, President Trump asked us to hold off on future attacks, and we're holding out.
He also said that Israel didn't push the U.S. into attacking Iran.
And I want to close these opening remarks with one other fake news, and that is that Israel somehow dragged the U.S. into a conflict. Does anyone really think that someone can tell President Trump what to do? Come on.
The U.S. and Israel appear to have different goals in this war, according to Thursday House committee testimony from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard.
We can see through the operations that the Israeli government has been focused on disabling the Iranian leadership and taking out several members, obviously beginning with the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, and they continue to focus on that effort. The president has stated that his objectives are to destroy Iran's ballistic missile launching capability, their ballistic missile production capability, and their Navy, the IRGC Navy and mine-laying capability.
The Trump administration is requesting $200 billion of additional funding for the war, a U.S. official confirmed on Thursday, but faces stiff opposition in Congress, which must approve the funds.
And the U.S. President Donald Trump also suggested that he was not looking at deploying soldiers to West Asia with the Iran war heading towards the fourth week. Listen in.
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you. But I'm not putting troops. Iran is a serious threat to the world, to the Middle East and to the world. And everybody agrees with me. I think virtually every country agrees with me on that. So I wanted to put out that fire. And I said, you know, if I do that, oil prices will go up, the economy will go down a little bit. I thought it would be worse.
All right, so no boots on the ground. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran no longer has the capacity to enrich uranium or produce ballistic missiles after nearly 20 days of the joint U.S. Israeli airstrikes. Speaking at a news conference, Netanyahu declared, "I'm alive and you're all witness," adding that Israel is continuing efforts to dismantle Iran's military capabilities. He claimed Iran's missile and drone arsenal has been degraded and vowed to crush them completely down to dust. Despite the escalation of tensions, Netanyahu said it remains unclear whether the Iranian public will rise against its government, adding that the choice ultimately lies with the people of Iran. Take a listen in.
First of all, I just want to say I'm alive and you're all witnesses. I think the question is, will the conditions be created for such a change? I think it's too early to say. And I think in the final account, as I said, it's up to the Iranian people to show that, to choose the moment and to rise to the moment. I think that what has to be done is to have alternative routes. Instead of going through the choke points of the Hormuz Straits and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, in order to have the flow of oil, just have oil pipelines, gas pipelines, going west through the Arabian Peninsula, right up to Israel, right up to our Mediterranean ports, and you've just done away with the choke points for forever. That is definitely possible. So I see that as a real change that will follow this war. But I also see this war ending a lot faster than people think. And I want to close these opening remarks with one other fake news, and that is that Israel somehow dragged the U.S. into a conflict with Iran. Does anyone really think that someone can tell President Trump what to do? Come on.
U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said Washington's objectives in the war against Iran remain unchanged since strikes began on February 28th. The Pentagon is now seeking over $200 billion from Congress to fund ongoing and future military operations. Now, speaking at a press conference, Hegseth defended the massive request, saying additional funding may still be needed. He added that sustained military action requires major resources as the U.S. prepares for possible next steps in the conflict. Take a look.
The Pentagon is seeking more than $200 billion from Congress to fund the ongoing war with Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended the request at a press conference on Thursday and suggested further requests could come.
As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future.
Hegseth told reporters that the objectives remained to destroy Iran's missile launchers, as well as its defense industrial base and navy, and to never allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon.
Our objectives, given directly from our America First president, remain exactly what they were on day one.
U.S. President Donald Trump and his aides have stated shifting goals for the war that began on February 28th, with joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian targets. The first 6 days of the war cost the U.S. at least $11.3 billion. That figure from a closed-door briefing for senators did not include the entire cost of the war, but was provided to lawmakers as they have clamored for more information about the conflict. Reuters reported on Wednesday that the Trump administration was considering deploying thousands of U.S. troops to reinforce the Iran operation, citing a U.S. official and 3 people familiar with the matter.
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Trump on Thursday dismissed the reporting, saying he was not looking to deploy soldiers as the war with Iran heads toward a 4th week.
All right, on to now the meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who was welcomed by the U.S. President at the White House. And Trump also praised Tokyo for stepping up on Iran. Trump contrasted Japan's support with what he called lukewarm backing from NATO allies as he continued to criticize partners over their limited involvement. Despite insisting the U.S. does not need help, Trump was still urging allies to contribute more naval support to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Listen in.
We're going to be speaking about it today. We've had tremendous support and relationship with Japan on everything. And I believe that based on statements that were given to us yesterday, the day before yesterday, having to do with Japan, they are really stepping up to the plate. Yes.
And Donald Trump later drew a parallel between U.S. strikes on Iran and Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor decades ago as he defended the war against Tehran. Listen in.
One question, why didn't you tell U.S. allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, no, you believe in surprise, I think much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did. And because of that surprise, we knocked out, the first 2 days, we probably knocked out 50% of what we, and much more than we anticipated doing. So if I go and tell everybody about it, there's no longer a surprise, right?
Meanwhile, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi condemned Iran's attack in the Strait of Hormuz, warning of serious consequences for the global economy. Speaking from the Oval Office alongside U.S. President Donald Trump, Takaichi said the escalating tensions in West Asia could trigger widespread economic disruption. She stressed that stability in the region is critical, given the Strait's role as a key global energy route. Takaichi also expressed confidence in Trump's leadership, saying he was uniquely positioned to help bring peace and ease tensions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU stands in solidarity with Gulf nations as Iran strikes on energy infrastructures and oil and gas prices soaring to nearly double the pre-war levels. Speaking after a Brussels summit, she warned the crisis poses risks for beyond West Asia with global economic implications. Von der Leyen also announced over 450 million euros in humanitarian aid for the region.
The situation in the region is extremely serious. It is causing great instability, suffering, and growing risks far beyond the region itself. And this is why we need de-escalation and maximum restraint, the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. And I want to say a word about our partners and friends in the Gulf and the broader region. We stand with them in solidarity and in friendship. The European Union is supporting them. And just this week, the Commission announced over 450 million euros in humanitarian assistance for the region.
Meanwhile, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte backed U.S. Israeli strikes on Iran, calling them crucial for regional security. Speaking in Brussels, Rutte said the attacks are degrading Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities, something he described as vital for both Europe and West Asia, as well as Israel's security. He also confirmed that NATO allies are discussing how to respond to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Capability in my contacts with allies all over NATO territory. What I'm sensing and hearing is that we all agree, as we always did, that it was crucial for Iran not to get its hands on a nuclear capability, a ballistic missile capability, and what the US is doing at the moment is degrading that capability of Iran, and I think that's very important. This is important for European security, for the Middle East. It is vital for Israel itself.
All right, let's slip into a quick break right now. When we come back, a quick look at the stock markets, which are showing some green shoots in trade this morning after the massive 2,500-point cut that we saw in Sensex yesterday. We'll bring you that and a lot more on the other side. Morning brief at 9.
Someone to bring your vision into reality. When human vision meets artificial intelligence, storytelling enters new territory. Two distinct categories: brand films, short films, evaluated by the best of the best. Seen by those who shape the industry. Rewarded with a 10 lakh rupee prize pool. Celebrated at What India Thinks Today, Delhi. AI Squared Awards, where artificial intelligence meets artistic imagination.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
What you saw me on the field and off the field is like chalk and cheese.
No guts, no glory, no pain, no gain.
My tendency is to go for magic, not for perfection.
I never give up. I like to win.
Just me being here, it's a statement.
When chips are down, the whole team could have looked up to you, said, Dada is still there.
Every time, whether I scored 100 or a Sachin scored 100 or a Rahul scored 100, the scoreboard said India won.
Let the kids know and the families know. To get a good education, go to a good school and a good college anywhere in the world is if you play a sport well.
There is a quality about me. Perhaps people feel I'm a perfectionist because I don't get tired easily.
In Germany, the biggest newspaper was written on the first page, "This is a finishing from Lothar Matthäus' career," and this was motivating me.
I was literally on my phone at home and they're like, oh, we have the results. We suggest that you remove your breasts. And I'm like, wait, what?
Welcome back. You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Time now to take a quick look at the stock markets across the world. Let's begin with Asia first. And mixed cues really coming from Asian indices, with Japan continuing to tank. In fact, Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 is down once again in trade. Today it's down about 3.5% or so, 3.38% on the ticker right now to about 53,300 odd levels. Even the Hong Kong benchmark Hang Seng is down in trade. It's down about 0.5 percentage point, but the rest of Asia seems to be in better mood this morning, with KOSPI, the South Korean index, up about 0.75 percentage point, and Taiwan's TAIEX as well as China's Shanghai Composite Index trading mostly flat. Meanwhile, let's move on to India and the Indian markets. After the massive decline that was witnessed in trade yesterday, some recovery, value buying, one would potentially argue, with the Sensex and the Nifty both up about 1.25 percentage points each. Sensex has recovered almost 1,000 points in the first 10 minutes or so of trading, with now levels in 75,160 odd range. Nifty 50 meanwhile also up almost 280 points in early trade, up to about 23,280 odd levels. Small cap and mid cap pretty much following the precedent set by the large cap indexes. Meanwhile, the India VIX, the fear gauge, is also down in trade, a positive sort of signal for investors out there that volatility could potentially be reducing, but still at elevated levels of about 22. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map, and it seems that it's pretty much a good green day for most stocks which are listed on the Nifty 50 index, with major gains coming in for the heavyweight Reliance Industries, which is up about 1.6%. SBI also up about 2.8% or so in trade. The only aberration continues to be HDFC Bank, and remember, this happens a day after the stock had tanked about 4.5% or so, at some point even touched below the 5% mark, but no real clarity emerging on the real reasons for the resignation of Tanu Chaudhary, and that is something which Tanu Chakrabarti, I beg your pardon, which is something which is weighing down on investor sentiment this morning as well. So HDFC continuing to take a little bit of beating. Meanwhile, the rest of the banking pack, which was all in a deep red yesterday, has recovered significantly. Meanwhile, there's better news coming even from the IT space, and perhaps some remarks coming from tech leaders, including NVIDIA's boss Jensen Huang on artificial intelligence. But overall, the sentiment across the entire IT pack on Nasdaq was also positive, and that is something which is reflecting with healthy gains that are visible across stocks of Infosys, which is up about 2.1%, Tech Mahindra, which is up about 2.7%, as well as HCL Tech, Wipro, as well as TCS, all ahead of 1% rise or so. Meanwhile, the consumer durable sector, which was again battered in trade yesterday, is looking better. Look at auto stocks of Maruti Suzuki, Mahindra and Mahindra, Bajaj Auto. All of these are in the green territory this morning. So overall, the mood of markets definitely seems to be more positive. Is this going to stay, and are there going to be further disruptions which could mar investor sentiments? Of course, we'll keep an eye on that. All right, with that, we will slip into another very short break. When we come back, a lot more in the world of artificial intelligence as well as self-driving cars lined up for you. Keep watching News 9.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
Co-powered by Tata Motors Commercial Vehicles, Better Always. Sustainability partner Jackson, powering a sustainable future. GCC partner, enabling you to shape a better tomorrow. Education partner, KL Deemed to be University. Tourism partner, International Film Festival Delhi by Delhi Tourism. State partner, Simply Heaven, Dev Bhumi, Land of the Gods, Uttarakhand Government. Punjab Government, Madhya Pradesh Government. Associate sponsor, Gold partner,
Welcome back. You're watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Time now to take a quick look at the ramifications and the implications, the economic implications of the war in West Asia. Well, global trade growth is set to slow sharply as the West Asia war continues to disrupt energy and transport flows. A World Trade Organization report said on Thursday that trade in goods is expected to grow just 1.9% this year, down from 4.6% in the year 2025. Now, the slowdown is being driven by rising energy prices and supply disruptions linked to the U.S. Israeli war with Iran. While trade in AI-related products has provided some resilience, the outlook remains under pressure as the conflict expands. The WTO warns that if oil and gas prices stay elevated, growth could further slow down to 1.4%. It also flagged risks to global food security with the potential blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, threatening fertilizer supplies to countries like India, Thailand, as well as Brazil.
The report really features two headlines, but they are related. The first is that growth in merchandise world trade volume in 2025 came in at a surprisingly strong 4.6%. The second is that the forces that delivered this unusually strong growth are unlikely to persist through 2026. And in our baseline scenario, we forecast that 2026 growth in world merchandise trade will therefore fall to 1.9%. Of course, the big unknown is the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on our baseline forecasts. If elevated energy prices persist for the rest of the year, we expect that growth in world GDP would fall from our baseline prediction of 2.8% in 2026 to 2.5% before recovering in 2027. And we predict that this would shave half a percentage point off our baseline prediction for merchandise trade volume growth for 2026, dropping it to 1.4%. Growth would then rebound to 2.8% in 2027, since oil prices are assumed in our modeling to recede by then.
All right, on to U.S. stock markets now. U.S. stocks ended in the red on Thursday, led by declines in technology heavyweights, including Micron Technology and Tesla. Investor sentiment was weighed down by concerns that soaring oil prices could push inflation higher. Now, that in turn has raised doubts about how soon the Federal Reserve might cut interest rates. Markets remain sensitive to developments in West Asia, with the ongoing conflict continuing to drive volatility in energy prices. Take a look.
U.S. stocks ended lower on Thursday, with the Dow dropping just under 0.5% and 500 and NASDAQ each shedding more than 0.25%. Investors remained cautious a day after Fed Chair Jerome Powell warned of economic uncertainty, with the Middle East conflict sending energy prices soaring and creating fears of inflation. Interest rate futures suggest traders see little chance of rate cuts before mid-2027, according to the CME's FedWatch tool. Mike Muscio is president of FBB Capital Partners.
We have another down day on Wall Street in the wake of the Fed just basically saying they're not going to lower rates. The Fed saying that inflation is a little bit higher than they wish it would be. Unemployment is a little bit worse than they wish it would be. And that the conflict or war in Iran is not really helping matters. We haven't seen this degree of volatility for this kind of long period of time, and almost a year since Liberation Day. And absent new data that would indicate that there are reasons not to have volatility, this is probably something investors are going to be stuck with at least through the end of the quarter, which is the next couple of weeks, and we'll see where it goes from there.
The S&P 500 has lost more than 3% so far this year and is trading at 4-month lows. Among individual movers, shares of Micron Technology dropped nearly 4% after the memory chip maker's quarterly forecast failed to impress investors, despite the company seeing strong demand related to AI. Shares of AI chip powerhouse NVIDIA, the world's most valuable company, lost 1%. And shares of Tesla slid more than 3% on news that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has escalated its probe into more than 3 million Tesla vehicles with full self-driving driver assistance. The investigation is tied to concerns the system may fail to detect or warn drivers in poor visibility.
Like the US, the European Central Bank too has held interest rates steady at 2% on Thursday, warning that the U.S. Israeli war with Iran is clouding the outlook for growth and inflation in the Eurozone. Rising energy prices and geopolitical risks are complicating the central bank's policy decisions.
The European Central Bank left interest rates unchanged as expected on Thursday, but its chief, Christine Lagarde, said it was closely watching growth and inflation risks from surging oil prices and was ready to act if necessary.
We are well positioned to demonstrate our capacity to apply our strategy and to be agile, to do what is necessary, because, second point, we are determined to ensure that inflation stabilizes at 2% medium term.
Energy prices have jumped since the U.S. Israeli war on Iran began on February the 28th. It's driving bets that inflation will be pushed far above the ECB's 2% target within months. That could force the central bank to tighten policy to prevent rapid price growth from becoming entrenched. Markets now expect more than 2 hikes in the ECB's 2% deposit rate this year. Policymakers were accused of acting too late on the 2021-2022 inflation surge after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And analysts think they will be quicker to pull the trigger this time. Central banks normally look past such energy shocks since expensive fuel saps consumer demand and drags down economic growth. Policy moves will ultimately depend on the duration of the war. And the ECB's own economic projections reflected this uncertainty.
It will have a material impact on near-term inflation through higher energy prices. Its medium-term implications will depend both on the intensity and duration of the conflict and how the energy prices affect consumer prices in the economy.
Financial market pricing now assumes inflation will rise to the vicinity of 3.7% in the year ahead. But these indicators are volatile and are prone to rapid changes.
Europe is scrambling to contain the economic fallout as the Iran war hits global energy supplies. European countries have rushed to cushion the impact of soaring oil and gas prices after strikes on key Gulf energy facilities, including Qatar's Ras Laffan, the world's largest LNG plant. Leaders across the continent are weighing financial measures to protect households and businesses as energy costs spike sharply.
European countries scrambled to cushion the impact of soaring oil prices on Thursday after the most economically significant escalation of the U.S. Israeli war on Iran. EU leaders gathering in Brussels were set to try to offset the jump in energy costs. It follows a number of strikes on Gulf energy plants, including the world's largest gas plant in Qatar. State oil giant Qatar Energy reported extensive damage after Iranian missiles hit the Ras Laffan industrial city. It processes about a fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas. The strike was in response to Israel's bombing of Iran's major gas field. Saudi Arabia's backup oil port on the Red Sea was also attacked by Iran. The seemingly precise strikes were a dramatic demonstration of Iran's continuing ability to respond to the US-Israeli campaign, and highlights the limits of air defences to protect one of the Gulf region's most valuable and strategic assets. It also suggested a lack of coordination between the US and Israel almost 3 weeks into the war. Trump said the US had no advance knowledge of Israel's attack on Iran's gas field, and that Qatar, a close partner of Washington and host to the Gulf's biggest US airbase, was not involved. As surging energy prices stoked inflation fears, the likelihood of interest rate hikes increased, ahead of Thursday's European Central Bank and Bank of England meetings. Brent futures were up about 7% to more than $114 a barrel by mid-morning, while European gas prices have leapt by over 60% since the war began at the end of February. Saudi Arabia intercepted a ballistic missile launched towards Yanbu. The port city serves as the kingdom's only outlet for crude exports since Iran in effect closed the Strait of Hormuz.
And Europe's aviation industry is pushing back against what it calls burdensome regulations around sustainable aviation fuel as Iran war-driven fuel costs surge globally. Airlines argue that higher fuel costs linked to the war are already squeezing margins, making it harder to meet green targets.
European airline chiefs were meeting in Brussels on Thursday under the cloud of war in the Middle East and soaring oil prices. They're pushing back against the EU's green agenda and what the industry says are cumbersome rules surrounding sustainable jet fuel. Reuters reported earlier this week that, citing a lack of available supply and high costs, Europe's airlines are expected to call for regulators to roll back mandates for the use of synthetic sustainable jet fuel starting in 2030. Air France, KLM, Ryanair, Lufthansa, EasyJet and British Airways owner IAG have for years lamented the issue. They see the rules as a burden on Europe's airlines, allowing Asian and Middle Eastern carriers a cost advantage. The green jet fuel industry and environmental groups insist the shift is necessary to reduce the sector's reliance on oil. While sustainability is in focus, the Iran war and oil prices above $100 a barrel will likely be front and centre. The Middle East conflict, now well into its third week, has thrown aviation into turmoil. Flights have been cancelled or rerouted thousands of miles, and most airspace over the Gulf is still closed amid fears of missile and drone attacks. Jet fuel prices have spiked, pushing up operating costs. European prices have doubled, and Asian prices are up almost 80% since U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran began in late February.
Meanwhile, India has also stepped up efforts to secure fuel supplies amid disruptions caused by the West Asia conflict. The government says it is diversifying energy imports to ensure there is no shortage for consumers. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Ranveer Jaiswal said on Thursday that India is sourcing LPG and crude from multiple countries, and if it is available from Russia, the option would be exercised to maintain supply stability. He added that New Delhi is exploring all available options in the global market to meet domestic demand. India also reiterated the need for unimpeded transit of goods and energy as the Iran conflict disrupts key supply routes in West Asia.
गैस की बात, क्या हम रशिया से एलपीजी खरीद रहे हैं? एलपीजी हम सभी जगह से हम खरीदने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं जहां उपलब्ध है। तो अगर उसमें रशिया उपलब्ध होगा तो वहां भी जाएंगे, क्योंकि स्थिति इस प्रकार की है अभी कि हमको सुनिश्चित ये करना है कि हमारे लोग का जो ईंधन का जो उनकी ज़रूरतें हैं उनकी पूरा हो। किन किन देशों से कर रहे हैं मैं ये बता सकता हूं कि बहुत सारे देशों से कर रहे हैं। अब उसमें कौन कौन सा देश है वो ब्यौरा हमारे पास नहीं है। ये इन सब जानकारी के लिए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ पेट्रोलियम आपको ज़्यादा बेहतर बता पाएगा, लेकिन मैं ये कह सकता हूं कि हम लोग चाह रहे हैं कि हमारे विकल्प बहुत सारे हों।
And India's aviation regulator, DGCA, or the Director General of Civil Aviation, has issued a fresh advisory as the West Asia conflict continues to disrupt regional airspace. The DGCA has asked airlines to avoid 9 airspaces, including Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Qatar, and the UAE, citing safety concerns. Carriers have been told to refrain from operating in these zones at all altitudes unless a detailed risk assessment is carried out. Flights can continue to fly over Oman and Saudi Arabia, but with strict conditions, including maintaining higher cruising altitudes. The regulator has also directed airlines to prepare robust contingency plans and keep crew updated on the latest airspace restrictions. The advisory is effective immediately and will remain in place till March 28th as tensions in the region continue. Well, the West Asia conflict is now disrupting aviation fuel supplies into Africa as well. South African airlines are introducing fuel surcharges to compensate for the huge losses incurred as jet fuel supplies tighten globally. The disruption caused in the Strait of Hormuz is pushing up and adding pressure on airlines across the African continent.
Ground crews at a private airport checked gauges before refueling an aircraft in Johannesburg, South Africa. Airlines here are now adding fuel surcharges as the conflict in the Middle East disrupts oil transit. South Africa's fuel supplies are vulnerable as most imported petrol and diesel comes from Oman, the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia.
It's going to have a major impact on the business.
Yanni de Klerk is the director of flight operations for South Africa's National Airways Corporation. He said volatility in pricing right now meant fuel costs could change between takeoff and landing.
You know, you fly to airports all over Southern Africa, West Africa, East Africa, and you bargain on certain pricing when you get there, but by the time you get there, the pricing's changed, and that's the big challenge at the moment. We do believe that that will change. We do believe that if the war continues in the Middle East, the availability is going to become a problem.
The choke point sits far to the north, the Strait of Hormuz, where the conflict has effectively halted tanker movements, forcing refiners and airlines to draw down inventories and seek longer, risk-laden routes. Industry officials and analysts say the disruption ranks among the most severe energy shocks in decades. They say spare capacity elsewhere is insufficient to fully offset the shortfall. The aviation sector is particularly exposed because jet fuel supply chains are thin and easily strained. In Mogadishu, a Jet A1 truck rolled into a depot as workers carried out quality checks near storage tanks. Dahir Makau is with Haas Petroleum in Somalia.
We have no issue with storage facility. The capacity is good with our market. But the main problem is the supply route. Since we are getting the import from the Gulf region, especially UAE and Oman, as I've said, that's actually where the worry is coming from. The problem is the supply, not the storage.
And on to the world of technology now. China's tech giant Baidu has unveiled a new AI agent at a major tech showcase. The company introduced its Lobster AI agents built on the OpenClaw platform, which NVIDIA CEO has described as a major breakthrough in artificial intelligence. Take a look.
Lobsters were everywhere at an event hosted by China's leading internet search provider Baidu in Beijing this week. It introduced a family of lobsters, its nickname for AI agents built on OpenClaw, an open-source tool. Reuters correspondent Stephen Ellis covers the technology industry and attended NVIDIA's recent conference where OpenClaw was a hot topic.
One way to think about this thing called OpenClaw is a sort of middle management layer for AI employees. So in the AI world, there are these things called agents that act like employees that can go out and use a piece of software for you or carry out a task. So OpenClaw acts like a bit of a middle manager where you tell the computer what you want done, and then it goes and finds the right employees, the right agents to go carry out that task. It collects all that information and then brings it back to you in language that humans can understand.
Think trip planning or pulling together a project. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang called the technology the next ChatGPT and, quote, the most popular open source project in the history of humanity.
OpenClaw has open sourced essentially the operating system of agentic computers. It is no different than how Windows made it possible for us to create personal computers. Now OpenClaw has made it possible for us to create personal agents.
Growing enthusiasm over the technology sent Chinese tech shares up by as much as 22% in recent weeks, as companies rolled out a suite of products based on the agent.
This is stunningly exciting.
Former Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger sees tremendous potential for the concept, but a lot of risks too.
OpenClaw is, a couple months old, right? We're barely in this view of how agents are going to get deployed and operationalized. And of course, businesses are looking at this a couple of months old, right? And there's tons of security issues, right? There's a lot of questions of how do I get access to my data? How do I make it available to my enterprise systems? How secure is it when I've done that?
Companies like NVIDIA are already working on this. It is targeting the autonomous AI agent market through NemoClaw, an add-on system that integrates with OpenClaw. to provide privacy and safety controls for AI agents capable of executing a wide range of tasks with minimal human oversight.
And Uber is betting big on autonomous electric vehicles. The ride-hailing giant will invest up to $1.25 billion in electric vehicle maker Rivian as part of a deal to deploy 10,000 autonomous SUVs as robotaxis in the US from the year 2028. The move marks a major push into the future of driverless mobility.
Shares of Rivian rose as much as 10% Thursday morning after the electric vehicle maker struck a deal with Uber to provide robotaxis to the ride-hailing service. Both companies said Uber will invest up to $1.25 billion in Rivian, which in turn will provide 10,000 fully autonomous robotaxis to Uber beginning in 2028. The companies added that Uber has the option to buy up to 40,000 more robotaxis beginning in 2030. Rivian, which is best known for its high-end R1S SUVs and R1T pickup trucks, has not launched a robotaxi yet, but it unveiled its first custom computer chip for self-driving in December. The company will roll out its smaller, more affordable R2 SUVs this year, with autonomous versions of the R2 serving as Uber's robotaxis. The deal comes as interest in driverless taxis has surged in recent months, with tech partnerships and AI looking to solve complex traffic scenarios faster and mitigate high costs that have plagued the industry. Alphabet's Waymo, which has launched robotaxis in several U.S. cities, has accelerated its rollouts, while Tesla has launched a small robotaxi service in Austin, Texas, with CEO Elon Musk promising rapid expansion this year. Uber, for its part, is positioning itself as a marketplace for multiple robotaxi operators and has partnered across much of the autonomous vehicle industry, including with Waymo, Baidu, and Lucid. Uber is also working with NVIDIA on autonomous driving, leveraging the chip designer's AI and simulation platforms to support the development and scaling of robotaxi systems.
And finally, global art supplies brand Crayola is expanding its presence in India through a strategic partnership with writing instruments major Luxor. The collaboration aims to make creativity tools more accessible to Indians while also tapping into India's growing market as well as Luxor's manufacturing strength. News9's Smriti Shekhar was at the Luxor Crayola launch party and filed this report.
So Crayola is a 120-year-old iconic brand from America. It is the #1 brand for creative learning for kids in the US. And Luxor is bringing Crayola to India with a lot of pride for the Indian young consumers.
Crayola's partnership with Luxor marks a significant step in its long-term expansion strategy in India. The collaboration aims to bring globally recognized creative products to a much wider audience across the country. With Luxor handling manufacturing and distribution, Crayola products are expected to reach millions of children across India, one of the world's youngest and fastest growing consumer markets.
Crayola is the largest coloring range in the world. We have more than 300 colors. We will bring every single color to the Indian young kids, young minds, to build them for better future for India.
At the core of this partnership is a focus on encouraging hands-on creativity helping children express themselves, build their confidence, and learn through play.
Crayola is a highly safe and non-toxic. It is the best in the world as far as production and product is concerned. High quality and trust is what it has gained in the last 120 years. This is what we are bringing to India, and we hope that India can imagine with this brand.
For Crayola, India represents a major opportunity. With millions of students and a growing focus on experiential learning, the demand for creative tools is also increasing. This partnership also reflects a broader trend. Global brands are increasingly turning to India, not just as a market, but as a key manufacturing and growth hub.
The legacy makes today even more meaningful, because today, on 19th March 2026, we are defining another moment in Luxa's journey. Today, we bring to India world's most loved creative brand, Crayola.
खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
Co-powered by Tata Motors Commercial Vehicles, Better Always. Sustainability partner Jackson, powering a sustainable future. GCC partner, enabling you to shape a better tomorrow. Education partner, KL Deemed to be University. Tourism partner, International Film Festival Delhi by Delhi Tourism. State partner, Simply Heaven, Dev Bhumi, Land of the Gods, Uttarakhand Government. Punjab Government.